You know, life has a funny way of settling into a rhythm, doesn't it? Especially when you reach my age, 72 to be exact. The days begin to blend, a gentle hum of routine. Mornings filled with the quiet comfort of Earl Grey tea, the scent of lavender dryer sheets from yesterday's laundry, and the faint, familiar creak of the old floorboards upstairs. My little home, nestled on Elm Street, has always been my sanctuary, a keeper of memories, some sweet as summer peaches, others bitter as medicine. But mostly it was a quiet place where I lived with the ghost of a life that once was, a life centered around my beloved Wally. My son, Walter Jr., or Wally as everyone called him, was my only child, a bright, sensitive soul, gone too soon. A terrible accident, years ago, left a void in my heart that no amount of time, no comforting casserole from Mrs. Henderson next door could ever truly fill. After he passed, his widow, Margaret, drifted away from my life, a wisp of smoke caught in the wind, leaving me to navigate the quiet depths of my grief alone. I often blamed myself, you see, wondered if I'd done enough, sad enough, loved enough. That constant ache, that whisper of what if, became the soundtrack to my twilight years. Then came the box. It arrived on a Tuesday, no warning, just sitting there on my porch swing, nestled amongst the wilting petunias. A small, unassuming cardboard package, slightly yellowed, as if it had been sitting in some dusty corner for ages. My name, Agnes Miller, was scribbled across the top in my son Wally's unmistakable handwriting. My heart gave a jolt, a painful lurch that made me clutch at my chest. Wally. It had been years. How could this be? My fingers trembled as I carried it inside, the afternoon light filtering through the lace curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of stale cardboard mixed with the lingering aroma of my morning toast. I set it down on the old oak kitchen table, the one Wally used to do his homework on, leaving faint pencil marks I never had the heart to scrub away. My eyes traced the simple inscription on the top of the wooden box inside. To Mom. Open when the time is right. The time is right? I whispered to the empty room, my voice a raspy tremor. What time? What could he possibly have sent all those years ago that only now found its way to me? A strange mix of anticipation and dread settled in my stomach like a cold stone. This wasn't just a package, it felt like a message from beyond, a final echo of a life cut short. A secret, perhaps, something he couldn't tell me when he was alive. I had this gnawing feeling, a prickle on the back of my neck, that whatever was inside, it wouldn't be simple. I took a deep, shaky breath, my mind racing through a lifetime of memories with Wally. His mischievous grin when he stole a cookie, his quiet intensity when he worked on a project, the way he always knew how to make me laugh even on the darkest days. Could this be a last, loving gesture? A final piece of his beautiful, complex puzzle? Or something else entirely? A shiver ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the summer day. I had a feeling that this little box, so innocently placed on my porch, was about to unravel more than just a memory. It felt like the very foundation of my past was about to be shaken. If you're finding yourself drawn into this quiet corner of my world, please consider subscribing. There's so much more to this story. A story that changed everything I thought I knew. But then I opened the box, and my world truly turned upside down.
The air thickened around me the moment my fingers brushed against what lay inside that humble wooden box. It wasn't jewelry, no faded letters tied with ribbon, no stack of old photographs I'd somehow forgotten. It was a single, slightly creased photograph of a young woman I'd never seen before, holding a baby. She had kind eyes, though a weariness seemed etched around them, and a smile that hinted at unspoken hardships. And right beside it, a yellowed birth certificate. My breath hitched in my throat. My son, Walter Jr., was listed as the father, and the mother, Beatrice Stone. Beatrice Stone! The name echoed in the silence of my kitchen, a foreign sound, utterly alien to my memory. Wally? A child? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the image, the name, to disappear. This couldn't be right. My Wally? He would have told me. He always told me everything. Or so I thought. The scent of dust motes dancing in the sunbeams suddenly felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of this unbelievable revelation. My perfect, gone too soon son with a secret family? It felt like a cruel joke, a betrayal from the grave. My first instinct was to call Margaret, Wally's widow. Surely she knew something. Margaret and I hadn't been close since Wally's passing. Grief, in its own isolating way, had driven us apart, each retreating into our own sorrow. But this was different. This was about Wally and a life he apparently lived outside of ours. When I called her, her voice, usually crisp and composed, had an unfamiliar tremor. "Agnes, what's wrong?" she asked, hearing the strain in my own voice, I suppose. I tried to sound calm, but my words tumbled out, breathless. "Margaret, I found something. A box from Wally." I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "A picture, a birth certificate, a child." There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated only by the distant squawk of a bird outside my window. Then a sharp intake of breath. "A child," Margaret repeated, her voice barely a whisper, laced with something I couldn't quite place. Was it shock? Guilt? Fear? My stomach churned. "Yes, a girl, listed as Wally's daughter. Her mother is Beatrice Stone." Another silence. Longer this time. "Agnes," Margaret finally said, her voice strained, "I don't know anything about this. Truly. Wally, he never mentioned anyone named Beatrice or a child." But her denial felt practiced, too quick, perhaps. My maternal instinct, sharpened by years of raising Wally, screamed that something was off. Margaret's evasiveness, the way she steered the conversation away from any probing questions, only fueled my growing suspicion. She tried to persuade me to leave it be, to respect Wally's memory, as if discovering a hidden child was somehow disrespectful. But all I felt was a furious resolve. No, I needed answers, for Wally, for myself, and for this mysterious child. Days bled into a frantic blur of phone calls and online searches. The name Beatrice Stone led me down several dead ends until I found a sparse obituary from a small town hours away. It mentioned the daughter, a Lily Stone, now in her early 20s. My heart leaped. Lily, could this be her? My granddaughter? The idea, so foreign just days ago, began to root, blossoming into a fragile hope amidst the wreckage of my shattered illusions. I packed a small bag, the scent of mothballs clinging to my oldest traveling coat. My trusty Buick, Old Bess, rumbled to life, the familiar sound a small comfort in the storm of my emotions. The drive was a blur of highway and introspection. My mind wrestled with a million questions. Why would Wally keep such a monumental secret? Was he blackmailed? Did he really love this woman? And what about Margaret? Did she really know nothing? The more I thought, the more a chilling possibility began to form. What if Margaret did know? What if she was somehow involved in this deception? The thought felt like a betrayal, sharp and cold. As I drove, I found myself replaying old conversations with Wally, searching for clues, for anything I might have missed. A faraway look in his eyes, a vague reference to helping a friend out. Nothing concrete, just the whispers of my own distorted memory, trying to make sense of this new, terrifying reality. My own reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror, eyes haunted, lips pressed into a thin line. I felt a strange fear, baseless yet intensely real. Everything I had believed to be true about my family, about my life, was crumbling around me. Finally, after hours of driving, I pulled up to the address listed in Beatrice Stone's obituary. It was a modest, slightly worn house, surrounded by a riot of overgrown roses. A young woman was kneeling in the garden, her back to me, tending to a patch of vibrant red petunias. She had a slender build, a cascade of dark wavy hair, and a certain grace in her movements. As she stood and turned, my breath caught. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, were almost identical to Wally's. It was her, my granddaughter, my Lily. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. All the doubt, all the fear seemed to dissipate in that moment. This was real. This was Wally's child, my granddaughter, my connection to the son I had lost. "Lily?" I said, my voice cracking with emotion. She looked up, startled, a questioning look in her hazel eyes. Her confusion quickly melted into a shy smile. "Yes? Can I help you?" "My name is Agnes Miller," I managed, my heart pounding against my ribs. I think I might be your grandmother." Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, then something else. Recognition? Hope? She invited me inside, and the small, cozy house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. We sat in her living room, a room filled with mismatched furniture and a warmth that was both comforting and foreign. I showed her the photograph, the birth certificate. She studied them intently, her brow furrowed. She told me her mother, Beatrice, had died when Lily was young, and she had grown up believing her father was Walter Jr., who had tragically passed away. The pieces seemed to fit perfectly, a bittersweet reunion. But then, as I was about to embrace her, to truly welcome her into my fractured family, Lily said something that froze me to the core. "It's wonderful to meet you, Grandma Agnes, but you know, my dad, Walter Jr., he never actually visited us. My mom always said he sent money and letters through his trusted person. He wasn't the man in that picture." My heart, which had just begun to mend, shattered all over again. The man in the picture was my son, my Wally. If that wasn't her father, then who was? And what kind of twisted game was this?
The cinnamon scent in Lily's cozy living room, which had seemed so comforting moments before, now felt suffocating. My eyes darted from Lily's bewildered face to the faded photograph of my son, Wally, still clutched in my trembling hand. He wasn't the man in that picture. Her words echoed in my ears, a chilling mantra. If the man in the picture wasn't her father, then who was he? And more importantly, who was the man in the picture, if not Wally, to her? My mind reeled. The pleasant warmth of hopeful reunion evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that seeped into my bones. "What do you mean, he wasn't the man in that picture?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, thin and reedy. "That's Wally, my son, your father." The last word felt hollow, tasting like ash in my mouth. Lily looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. "My mom, Beatrice, she had a different picture, A small one, in a locket she always wore. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. The man in that picture was my dad. He had a kinder smile, a bit more silver in his hair, even in the old photo. He looked older. She said he visited when I was very, very small, but I don't remember him. Silver in his hair? Older? A different picture? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending disaster. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deeper, more insidious deception than I could have ever imagined. My mind flashed back to the inscription on the wooden box, "To Mom, open when the time is right." Had Wally written that? Or had someone else? And if Wally wasn't Lily's father, then who was he? And why, for heaven's sakes, was his name on her birth certificate? A strange, dizzying feeling swept over me. I felt like a character in a play, watching my own life unfold on a stage, but someone had rewritten the script without telling me. My carefully constructed reality, built on the solid ground of my husband's unwavering love and my son's honest nature, was disintegrating before my very eyes. I spent the rest of the afternoon with Lily, though my mind was a whirlwind of frantic thoughts. I learned more about Beatrice, Lily's mother. She had been a struggling artist, always ill, always fighting to make ends meet. Lily spoke of her with a gentle sadness, of a life marked by hardship, but also by fierce maternal love. Mom always said my dad was a good man, she recounted, her eyes distant, that he helped us, even though he couldn't be with us. She mentioned the trusted person again, the one who delivered letters and money. He was always so formal, Mr. Davies, a lawyer. He'd come once a month, like clockwork, hand over an envelope and leave. Mr. Davies. The name pricked at my memory. My husband, Harold, had a lawyer named Davies, Thomas Davies, a long-standing family acquaintance, a pillar of the community, always impeccably dressed with a stern, no-nonsense demeanor. Could it be the same man? The thought was a chilling whisper in my mind. I left Lily's house that evening in a daze, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the quiet suburban streets. The hopeful warmth I'd felt upon seeing Lily had curdled into a cold, sickening dread. My beautiful Wally, a liar. It didn't fit. His character, his essence, it was antithetical to such a profound deception. And yet there was Lily, living proof of a secret. Back home, the silence of my house was deafening, amplifying the chaotic symphony of my thoughts. I went straight to Harold's old study, a room I rarely entered since his passing. It still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco and old leather-bound books. His large mahogany desk sat imposing in the center, a silent sentinel of a life I thought I knew. I pulled open drawers, rummaging through old tax documents, bank statements, anything that might shed light on this nightmare. The papers rustled under my trembling hands, each rustle a protest against this intrusion into a past that was supposed to be settled. And then I found it. Tucked away in a hidden compartment at the back of a file drawer, a small, worn, leather-bound journal. Not Wally's. This was Harold's. My husband. My heart leaped, then plummeted. Inside, meticulously dated entries written in his familiar, elegant script. I scanned the pages, my eyes darting, until a name jumped out at me, bold and undeniable. Beatrice Stone. The entry was dated almost 25 years ago, nearly a year before Wally's tragic accident. Met with BS again. The child is growing. Must ensure her security. Thomas Davies has set up the arrangement. Wally's name on papers. Less messy this way. Agnes must never know. My secret. For her sake. My breath caught in my throat, a gasp of pure agony. Wally's name on papers? Less messy? My secret? For her sake? It wasn't Wally's secret. It was Harold's, my husband, my rock, my beacon of honesty and integrity. He was the father. He had had an affair, a child, and he had used our son's name, his future, as a shield to protect his own reputation, his own carefully constructed life with me. The world tilted. All the love, all the trust, all the years I had spent believing in the sanctity of our marriage crashed around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. I felt a searing, hot shame, not for myself, but for the man I had loved, for the life I had so blindly cherished. My heart constricted, a physical pain, as if something within me had been ripped apart. I stood there in the quiet study, the scent of Harold's pipe tobacco suddenly acrid, nauseating. My memory, usually so clear, began to blur and distort. I tried to recall specific moments, specific dates. Had there been signs? Had I been so blind, so trusting? My internal dialogue raged. The parent in me, the one who had always put family first, felt utterly betrayed. The child within me, the vulnerable part that craved security, felt utterly lost and abandoned. And the adult, the rational part, struggled to make sense of this monstrous lie. All that was sacred, all that was true, dissolved into a bitter, icy mist. And then I heard the key turn in the front door and knew Margaret was here.
The sound of Margaret's key in the lock, usually a familiar jingle that signaled a well-meaning but sometimes overwhelming presence, now grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. I froze, the journal still clutched in my hand, Harold's damning confession staring up at me from the yellowed page. The pipe tobacco scent in the study, once a comforting memory of my husband, now smelled like deceit. How could I face her? How could I face anyone, knowing the bedrock of my life had been built on such a colossal lie? Margaret bustled into the study, her cheeks flushed from the cool evening air. Agnes? I saw your car. I was worried. You didn't sound yourself on the phone earlier. What's all this? Her gaze fell upon the open journal in my hand, then to the photograph of Lily and the birth certificate scattered across the desk. Her eyes widened, and a gasp escaped her lips, a sound filled with genuine shock. You knew, I accused, my voice raw, stripped bare of its usual pleasantries. You knew about Harold, about Beatrice, about Lily. The words were shards of glass in my throat. Margaret's face drained of color, leaving her complexion ashen. She took a hesitant step back, her hands coming up as if to ward off a blow. Agnes, please, it's not what you think. Oh, isn't it? I retorted, a bitter laugh escaping me. Then tell me, Margaret, what is it? Because what I see here is my husband, the man I loved for 50 years, having a secret child, using my son's name to cover his tracks, and you, my son's wife, keeping it from me all these years. The accusations tumbled out, fueled by a searing cocktail of betrayal, grief, and incandescent rage. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes, and her composure, usually so steadfast, crumbled. I didn't want to. You have to believe me, Agnes. It was complicated. She wrung her hands, her gaze flitting nervously around the room, avoiding my furious stare. After Wally died, I found the box. Not yours, Agnes, but one Harold had given to Wally to hold on to. He trusted Wally. It contained all the documents, the truth. Harold had confessed everything to Wally. He knew he was sick, and he wanted Wally to tell you eventually, but then Wally, he was gone too. My mind spun. Harold told Wally? Before he died? So Wally wasn't complicit in the deception from the start, but rather tasked with revealing it. This twisted labyrinth of secrets only deepened. Why didn't you tell me, Margaret? I pressed, my voice breaking. Why did you let me live a lie? Margaret finally met my gaze, her eyes brimming with tears,
and the full weight of the second twist hit me. "Because Harold warned me," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He said he left instructions in his will and a separate, more detailed letter. Not for you, Agnes, but for me. He knew I'd find out. He knew someone would. He said if you ever found out, if I ever told you, it would destroy you. He painted a picture of your fragile heart, of how much you relied on the perfect image of our family. He said he had to protect you from the truth, no matter the cost. She paused, taking a shaky breath, and then I found out more. Not from Harold's papers directly, but from the lawyer, Mr. Davies, after Wally died. Harold had been paying off Beatrice's medical bills for years. She was gravely ill. He made sure Lily was cared for. He even left a trust for Lily, but it was set up in such a way, through a series of anonymous accounts and legal loopholes, that it couldn't be traced back to him or Wally easily. He truly believed he was protecting everyone, his legacy, your peace of mind. Even Lily, in his own twisted way, was protected from the shame of being a secret child. My head swam. Harold hadn't just cheated. He had manipulated, controlled, and pulled strings even from his deathbed, orchestrating a grand illusion to preserve his image and my supposed tranquility. He had used his own son as a pawn. He had silenced Margaret. He believed me too fragile, too weak to bear the truth. The rage I felt was so potent it was almost blinding. And then, in the midst of that blinding fury, a cold, hard truth settled in my stomach. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, sliced through the chaos. Harold's voice, years ago, when Wally was just a teenager. Wally had gotten into some minor trouble, nothing serious, just a misunderstanding at school. I remember being upset, ready to confront him, to talk through it. But Harold had put a hand on my arm. "Agnes," he said, his voice calm but firm, "let me handle it. You worry too much. It's better if you don't know the messy details. Some things are best kept quiet for everyone's sake." I had let him. I had trusted him. I had allowed myself to be shielded, to be protected from the messy details of life. How many times had I done that? How many times had I unknowingly encouraged his need to control, to fix things behind the scenes, rather than facing them head-on with me? The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I, who prided myself on my honesty and directness, had, in my own way, contributed to the very culture of secrecy that now threatened to shatter my life. Harold's belief in my fragility, his need to protect me, had been reinforced by my own willingness to retreat from discomfort. I hadn't been an unwitting victim. I had been a willing participant in my own blind trust. I saw in Harold's actions the echo of my own father, a man who, though kind, had a penchant for handling things himself, keeping small, well-intentioned secrets to spare his family worry. Margaret watched me, her face etched with a mixture of fear and profound sadness. "Agnes, I wanted to tell you so many times, but he made it so clear. He said it would destroy you. And honestly, after Wally, I was so lost. I didn't have the strength to dismantle everything." Her confession, delivered with such raw vulnerability, didn't extinguish my anger, but it shifted it. It wasn't solely directed at Margaret anymore. It was directed at Harold, at the elaborate web of deceit he had spun, and, terrifyingly, a sliver of it was directed at myself. Everything I thought was righteous crumbled in an instant. I stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of my past, caught in a swirling vortex of anger, shame, and a terrifying new understanding. The quiet life I had so carefully built, the one I believed was founded on love and truth, was nothing but a fragile illusion. And I,
Agnes Miller, was left to pick up the pieces of a truth I never wanted to hear.
The quiet click of the front door as Margaret finally left echoed in the silent house, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my past and the crushing weight of the present. The journal lay splayed open on Harold's desk, a testament to his deceit, a monument to my shattered illusions. The air, once thick with accusation, now felt heavy with a profound, aching emptiness. It was as if every cherished memory, every shared laugh with Harold, every whispered promise had been replayed through a filter of bitter truth, leaving behind only the cold, hard edges of betrayal. I walked through the house, my own home, yet it felt alien. The familiar creak of the stairs, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the scent of the potpourri in the living room, everything felt tainted. I touched the worn armrest of Harold's favorite armchair, the one where he used to read the newspaper, his glasses perched on his nose. How many times had he sat there knowing about Beatrice, about Lily, about the monumental lie he was living, the one he had so carefully orchestrated to protect me. The anger flared again, a hot, choking wave, not just at him, but at myself, for being so trusting, so blind, so willing to be protected from the messy realities of life. The realization that I had, in my own way, enabled his secrecy was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt like a mirror had been held up, showing me a weakness I never knew I possessed, a desire for a perfectly convenient life, free of unpleasantness, even if it meant being kept in the dark. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but the beauty outside did little to soothe the storm raging within me. I curled up on the sofa, the same sofa where Wally as a boy would snuggle up beside me for story time. Wally, my poor, sweet Wally. He had been caught in the middle of his father's web, burdened with a secret that wasn't his, tasked with the truth he never got to deliver. My anger at Harold mingled with a profound sorrow for my son, whose brief life had ended before he could fulfill his father's dying wish, or perhaps escape its clutches. The thought that Harold had manipulated his own son, even in death, felt like the cruelest cut of all. Hours passed. The house grew dark, save for the faint glow of the street lamp outside. My mind, usually a quiet sanctuary of reflection, was a battlefield. The parent in me, the part that had always nurtured and protected, felt a profound failure, both as a wife and a mother. The child within, bruised and vulnerable, wanted to lash out, to scream at the unfairness of it all. But the adult, the part that had to find a way to navigate this new, desolate landscape, knew that rage alone wouldn't bring peace. I thought about Lily. Innocent Lily, caught in the crossfire of a decades-old deception. She believed Wally was her father. She had lived her whole life with that belief. What right did I have to shatter her world further? Could I, in my pursuit of justice, inflict more pain on an innocent soul? My desire for vengeance, sharp and clear only hours ago, began to dull, replaced by a complex tangle of empathy and moral dilemma. I recalled the quiet strength in Lily's hazel eyes that mirrored Wally's but also held a wisdom born of a different kind of hardship. She deserved better than to be the casualty of my family's buried lies. A faint memory surfaced. A conversation with Harold years ago about a piece of land he owned. He'd called it his rainy day fund, a small plot of undeveloped acreage on the outskirts of the county. He'd mentioned, almost in passing, that for tax purposes or some other obscure legal reason, it was registered under an old friend's name, Mr. Henderson, our quiet, unassuming neighbor. At the time, I'd barely paid attention, trusting Harold implicitly with all our finances. But now the memory sparked a different kind of curiosity. Why Mr. Henderson? Why the secrecy? Harold's pattern of clandestine arrangements was painfully clear now. The weight of Harold's deception and my own complicity in allowing myself to be shielded pressed down on me. I felt a yearning for a different kind of justice, one that wouldn't simply destroy, but perhaps transform. I was standing at a crossroads. One path led to a vengeful public expose, a shattering of Harold's legacy, a potential devastation for Lily. The other, less clear, was a path of a more nuanced, perhaps a more profound retribution, one that would honor Wally's memory, and perhaps even find a way to turn Harold's deceit into something unexpected, something good. But how? How could I right a wrong that had festered for so long without causing more harm? The decision weighed on me, heavy and suffocating. It was a choice between vengeance and something far more complex. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever I chose, there was no going back. This moment was my irreversible point.
The early morning light, usually a gentle balm, felt harsh as it streamed through my kitchen window. I hadn't slept. My mind a relentless churn of Harold's betrayal and the innocent face of Lily. The choice I faced, vengeance or something more profound, loomed large. I thought of the old adage my grandmother used to say, "An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind." But what about justice? What about rectifying a wrong that spanned decades and involved those I loved most? The rainy day land Harold had mentioned, registered under Mr. Henderson's name, nagged at me. It was a tangible piece of his deception, a thread I could pull. I remembered Harold's meticulous nature, his penchant for keeping every document, every detail. If he had planned for this land to be a hidden asset, there would be paperwork, and if there was paperwork, there was a way. I spent the next few days not in a fit of rage, but in a quiet, calculated determination. I called Mr. Davies, Harold's lawyer. His voice was as formal and clipped as Lily had described. I feigned a sudden interest in some old property records, claiming Harold had mentioned a small parcel years ago, and I was simply trying to organize his estate. Mr. Davies, ever the professional, agreed to a meeting. The scent of old paper and stale coffee filled his office. He sat behind a massive oak desk, a fortress of legal tomes around him. I carefully steered the conversation, eventually bringing up the Henderson parcel. Mr. Davies's eyes, usually as impenetrable as granite, flickered, just for a moment. But it was enough. "Ah, yes, the Henderson parcel," he said, his voice flat. "Mr. Miller was quite particular about that. A rather intricate arrangement, actually." He shuffled through some files, pulling out a thick manila folder. My heart thumped against my ribs. What he revealed confirmed my suspicions and then some. Harold had indeed acquired the land decades ago, but the intricate arrangement was far more complex than a simple tax dodge. It was, as I suspected, connected to Lily. Harold, anticipating my eventual discovery of Lily's existence, or perhaps a challenge from Beatrice's side if she were to pass, had established an irrevocable trust tied to the future sale of that land. The trust's beneficiary was explicitly named as Lillian Stone, daughter of Beatrice Stone. The money from the sale, however, wouldn't go directly to Lily, not exactly. It was to be channeled, after significant legal fees and a portion allocated to a discretionary fund, into an anonymous charitable foundation Harold had secretly established years ago, and the specific instructions for this fund, buried deep within the trust documents, were chillingly precise. It was to support individuals of exceptional promise from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly those affected by familial disruption and financial misrepresentation. My blood ran cold. Harold, even in death, was orchestrating things.
He hadn't just provided for Lily, he'd woven her into a labyrinth of financial control, ensuring his name remained untainted and that even her future success would be a product of his hidden machinations. He was still trying to protect his image, even as he funded her life. This wasn't merely a lie, it was a deeply ingrained pattern of control, a refusal to ever truly be vulnerable or honest, even with those closest to him. It was his final, most profound act of emotional cruelty. But then, as I reread the trust documents, a different kind of strategy began to form in my mind, a twist, not of vengeance, but of subtle, transformative justice. Harold had built a complex financial apparatus to hide his guilt and manage his secret. What if I could use his own meticulously laid plans against him, not to destroy him publicly, but to subvert his control, to rewrite the ending of his story? The discretionary fund and the charitable foundation were key. Harold had intended them to operate anonymously, a way to do good without revealing his hand, maintaining his perfect facade. But the wording, while protecting his identity, also provided a loophole. The board of the foundation had discretion over the funds. And who were the board members? Mr. Davies, of course, and two other old, respectable, and utterly predictable associates of Harold's. They would follow the letter of Harold's wishes, ensuring the money benefited individuals of exceptional promise. My moment of decision was stark. I could expose Harold, shatter his name, destroy his legacy, and in doing so, expose Lily to the full, devastating truth of her origins and the public scandal that would surely follow. Or I could use Harold's own convoluted system, his desire for control, to rewrite the narrative. I chose the latter. I didn't seek public vengeance. Instead, I met privately with Mr. Davies and the other board members. I spoke not of Harold's betrayal, but of his unfulfilled philanthropic vision and my desire as his grieving widow to ensure his legacy was truly honored. I suggested that perhaps the foundation could focus its initial efforts on a single, profoundly deserving individual, someone who embodied exceptional promise and needed a true, life-changing opportunity, someone like Lily. I presented Lily's story, omitting the most painful details of her parentage, focusing instead on her intelligence, her quiet resilience, her artistic talent, and her mother's struggles. I spoke of it as a way to truly honor Harold's charitable spirit. The board, bound by Harold's obscure instructions and influenced by my tearful but firm plea, agreed. The Henderson parcel was quietly sold. The funds, after all the legal machinations Harold had put in place, or indeed channeled, anonymously, into the foundation, and then, as if by a benevolent hand of fate, a substantial, life-changing scholarship was granted to Lily Stone, enabling her to attend a prestigious art school she had only dreamed of. The accompanying letter simply stated it was from an anonymous benefactor, deeply moved by her story and talent. I never told Lily the full truth. She still believes Wally was her father, albeit a distant one. She still believes the scholarship was a miracle from a kind stranger. And I never revealed Harold's deepest secret to the world. His name remained untarnished in the public eye. But I knew, and that was my vengeance. Harold, the master manipulator, had his carefully hoarded wealth, his ultimate act of control, turned into an instrument of genuine good for the very child he had hidden, but without his name being glorified for it. He, who loved control above all else, had his final, most elaborate scheme used to benefit the innocent in a way he could never have anticipated or taken credit for. His effort to control the narrative, even after death, was subtly, irrevocably undermined. My relationship with Margaret, purged by the raw honesty of that confrontation in Harold's study, began to heal. We found a new,
quieter respect for each other, built on shared burdens rather than shared secrets. We never spoke of Harold's journal again. Life on Elm Street eventually settled into a new rhythm. The scent of lavender still filled my home, but it no longer carried the scent of regret. There are still days when I remember Harold and feel the sharp sting of his betrayal. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the pain. It's about choosing not to let it define you. And sometimes the most profound act of justice isn't about tearing down, but about quietly, subtly, building something new from the ruins of a lie. I often wonder if Lily, now a successful artist, ever truly reflects on that anonymous gift, that unexpected turning point in her life. What she doesn't know is the true cost of that blessing and the complex web of lies that preceded it. But perhaps some truths are best left undisturbed, allowing grace to bloom where only deceit once grew. And that, I've come to understand, is the truest victory of all.
Thank you for being with me through this journey. I know it wasn't an easy one, full of twists and turns I never could have foreseen. Sharing this story, this deeply personal chapter of my life, has been cathartic in a way I didn't expect. It's strange how some secrets, buried for decades, can still hold so much power, even after they're unearthed. If you found yourself nodding along, perhaps seeing echoes of your own family's complexities, or if this story simply resonated with a quiet corner of your heart, I'd be truly honored if you'd consider subscribing to this channel. Your support means the world to me, and it encourages me to keep sharing these intimate glimpses into lives both ordinary and extraordinary. And please, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever uncovered a family secret that reshaped your understanding of your past? How did you navigate those difficult truths? What does justice truly mean to you when it comes to betrayal, especially from those you loved? I believe there's so much we can learn from each other's experiences, and your insights would be invaluable. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, take care.